State your name for the record.
Daniel Cole,
And Daniel, where are you currently employed?
Panola County.
In what capacity are you employed with Panola County?
I'm the Director of Emergency Operations, Panola County,
And are you also a longtime firefighter?
since 1991.
I believe you got out of the fire department when you took your current position. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, as Director of Emergency Operations, what is your role in Panola County?
I wear multiple hats: emergency management, homeland security, search and rescue, fire coordinator, E911, and every 10 years the census.
And were you in this capacity on December the 6th of 2014?
I was.
And do you live near the Cortland community?
I live in the town of Cortland.
And you're aware of why you're here today. Did
Yes.
you respond to the scene on the road on December the 6th of 2014?
I did.
And where were you located when the call first went out?
I was at my in-laws on Main Street in Cortland.
And approximately how far is Main Street, Cortland, from your in-laws' house where you were that night? Approximately how far is that from the scene?
From the scene, I would say 3/4 of a mile, maybe a mile at the most.
And did you hear Cortland get toned out fire?
I did not.
How did you first find out that you had been, when were you first requested to the scene?
I received a phone call from dispatch stating that I had been requested to come out to a scene. They described it as the tree farm on Main Street, but it was actually the tree farm on Herring Road.
And did you know where that tree farm was located?
I did.
And why did they ask you to come out?
Anytime there's a injury, a fire injury or death, our office responds, completes paperwork, and assist with the fire investigation if needed.
And when you found out that an individual was involved, did you also speak to anybody with the sheriff department?
Once we got there, yes. So I requested to make sure that Panola 1, Panola 2, Panola 3 had been notified. I received a phone call, or either I called Panola 3 at some point.
Okay, when you say Panola 1, Panola 2, and Panola 3, give me the names. Talk about.
Sheriff Dennis Darby, Chief Deputy Chris Franklin, and Major Barry Thompson.
And is Major Barry Thompson a detective?
Yes, sir.
So did you have a conversation with Investigator Thompson that night?
I did.
And he was actually out of town, am I correct?
He wasn't on scene. I can't speak to his whereabouts.
When you arrived on the scene, tell me what you saw.
I pulled up on scene because of where I was. I went in my vehicle. I pulled up on scene. To see a female laying at the back of Cortland's fire truck that was heavily burned.
Do you know Jessica Chambers?
I do not.
Who was there on scene with her at the time?
There were two Cortland's firemen, and I think they were Cole Haley and maybe Jody Marsh were there when I got there. There was another fireman there, but he wasn't with her. I remember two people being there with her.
You mentioned a girl being on fire. Would you describe exactly what she looked like to this jury?
Well, she wasn't on fire, but she had been burned when I got there. She was sitting on a blanket, maybe a fireman's coat or vice versa. She was, hair was singed, just soot all around her nose and her mouth. When I tried to speak to her, it was difficult. It appeared as though maybe her tongue was real thick. Her lips were constricted. There was red, splotchy places from where the blistering had occurred all over her body.
Did you attempt to speak to her?
I did.
What type of information did you attempt to obtain?
Tried to obtain who she was.
And how did she respond when you asked who she was?
It took multiple attempts, but we got Jessica. We didn't start with Jessica. At one time, to me, it sounded like a Katrina, a Courtney. It was a very chaotic scene. There was a lot of noise. She wasn't speaking very loudly. You know, at one point, even laid down beside her just to get close enough to her to try to hear some of the things questions, and everything. Some things she said was clearer than others.
I'm going to ask you about the noise. What type of noise was it?
You had the fire truck, 2 fire trucks, the diesel engines off 2 fire trucks, the firemen running around, talking to each other, people, additional responders coming in. It was just a madhouse there for some time.
I've never actually made a fire scene, I'll tell you. What type of noise are we talking about with these fire engines?
I mean, they're diesel engines. I mean, one's a 1-ton diesel pickup, and the other's a fire truck with a big diesel engine in it.
And how close were they parked to Jessica Chambers?
Within feet. I mean, we were right at the back of the Cortland's pumper.
As you talked to Jessica, did you know that something was wrong on that scene?
To be honest with you, when I got there and saw her, once we established who she was, I asked her, I said, I don't even know if I asked her what happened. I think I just asked her, who did this? Or what happened, maybe that's what I asked.
Was she still speaking in the same manner you described before?
Yes, sir. She had the more questions we asked, she would start out strong, and then it would get extremely breathy, very difficult to understand.
Now, you did write a statement, and in your statement, you were able to obtain some information from her. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tell me what you heard and how you heard it.
Well, we got her name finally, and we then, who did this? It took multiple attempts, but I did hear Eric did this to me. Eric set me on fire. That's what I heard.
And was MedStat called, obviously?
Yes.
Ultimately, was she flown out to the regional medical center?
She was.
Now, after your conversation with the sheriff's department and based on your training, did you take any photographs on the scene?
I took one photograph. It was kind of a bus-style picture, and I didn't know how far out the law enforcement response was, and wanting to obtain as much information as we could before she left the scene, I did take a single picture basically from her shoulders up.
And you've seen some other pictures the sheriff's department took, correct?
I have.
And were you able to identify those pictures as what you saw that night of Jessica Chambers?
I sure can.
Is this photograph you mentioned to me in Chambers?
Yes, sir.
All right, and the defense has seen this photograph?
Yes, sir, Your
All
Honor.
right, any objections to its admission?
None, Your Honor.
All right, you may display the photograph. Sir, you may have it marked. Yes, sir.
Daniel, I'm going to show you 2 photographs. Can you describe and identify these photographs for me?
Yes, sir. There's the picture on the right. It's the one I took of Jessica Chambers on the scene.
And the picture on the left?
It's a picture that I think one of the deputies may have taken, but I recognize it.
Is this the condition that Jessica Chambers was in on December 6, 2014 when you were attempting to speak to her?
That is correct.
That's Exhibit 5.
Yes. Condition Jessica was in, how difficult was it to get her to speak?
It was a struggle, At one point, I personally got frustrated because it was hard to hear her. And at the same time, I think she was equally as frustrated because we was asking the same questions over and over again.
You've been around a long time.
I have.
Have you ever seen anything like this in your years?
Never.
Describe the scene and the attitude of the other firefighters on scene.
I mean, like I said, it was chaotic. Everybody was wanting to do something to help. I mean, there was people stepping over one another. You know, it just was people everywhere. There was people nervous, not knowing how, who, what, where, when. They were worried about people, you know, being close by, looking, seeing, you know, worried about their own safety. It was chaotic. I don't know how, I mean, this was the first time any of us have been involved in something like this.
And did you stay there on scene until help arrived with MedStat?
MedStat had arrived, and I left the scene to meet Panola 1, Sheriff Darby, to go make notification to the family, and we followed the ambulance down to the landing zone.
And did you, in fact, go with Sheriff Darby to notify Jessica's parents what had happened?
We did. I did.
Now, Daniel, switching gears, you actually live in Cortland, we talked about.
Yes.
And during this trial, we're going to discuss the area of your home. Okay?
All right.
Now, are you aware of where Otto Sanford subdivision is?
I am.
And where you live, which the jury will go to your home at one point during this trial, is there a road, is there a private drive on your property?
There's an access road that connects my property, the property around me, that goes up through Otto Sanford subdivision.
And that access road comes out where?
Otto Sanford subdivision, 51 Highway.
Is it in fact a private drive at a portion of it?
Yes, sir.
And have you ever known any individuals from Otto Sanford subdivision to use that path?
I've never seen anyone drive it. I have seen people walking through there and cutting across. Recently, there's been three-wheeler that comes through there some.
And when people from Otto Sanford walk down through there and cut across, what direction would they be headed?
They would head west, and then once they got into the opening, they would turn and go south.
And does that go right into downtown Cortland?
Yes, that's where they go to Railroad Avenue and then to Main Street.
Your Honor, I attend to the witness.
All right. Cross. Y'all to go trip over that cord. You keep pulling on it.
Your Honor, maybe if I could get a little assistance to. Yes, just a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Judge. Good morning, Mr. Cole.
Good morning.
I believe you testified that you got a call from Panola County 911. It's about 8:20 or so.
Yes, ma'am.
And the fact that you were at your in-laws, what time do you think that put you there? 8:25, something like that, on the scene?
I would say from the time I received the call to the time I made scene, strictly guesstimation because I don't have the times in front of me, I would say probably 2 to 2.5 minutes.
Okay. So 8:23?
Yes, ma'am.
When you got there, you saw who you thought to be Cole Haley and Jody Morris.
Yes, ma'am.
And just one other fire person that would have just been Seth. Do you know him?
Well, I know who he is.
So at that point, there was no other individuals there.
You know, I can't tell you that 100%. Like I said, when I pulled up, I'm not going to say that there wasn't another fireman. I don't recall from memory.
They were rendering aid, though. Jody Morris and Cole Haley were rendering aid to Miss Jessica, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I know Jay asked you about the fact that you did do a report back then. You
Yes.
agree with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Do you recognize that?
I do.
Is that your report?
Yes, ma'am.
Signature at the bottom, correct?
Correct.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to have this report admitted into evidence and marked as an exhibit.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, being no objection, be marked and admitted. All right, Ms. Palmer.
Thank you, Your Honor. You talked a little bit about talking to Jessica,
Yes, ma'am.
correct? And would you agree with me, your report is pretty detailed. You agree with that?
Well, I mean, yes, ma'am. It states the basics of what happened.
Yeah. And if you look through it, it also indicates where things that Miss Jessica stated to you, you put that in quotes.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, if you will, go to the second paragraph of that statement.
Mm-hmm.
You see where it says, I responded to the scene.
Yes, ma'am.
Start reading there for me.
And found Cortland and Station 14 fire departments on scene, extinguishing the car, and a couple of firefighter EMRs rendering aid to a female patient. I approached the patient and started asking who she was. She stated Jessica. I asked Jessica who, and after a couple of times of not hearing her, she said Chambers.
Okay. And if you would please go to the next paragraph, read that for me.
I then asked what happened, and Jessica responded saying, Eric set me on fire.
Is that in quotes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So back then you did this report about 12 hours, I think you said, after everything happened. Is
Yes,
that
ma'am.
correct?
That is correct.
And is the Eric set me on fire in quotes?
Yes, ma'am.
Continue reading for me.
I asked Jessica again what happened, and she stated multiple times, Eric set me on fire. I then asked what was Eric's last name, and Jessica responded, I don't know. And it's not in quotes, because, I mean, that's what I got out of what she was saying, and she was kind of shrugging her shoulders.
Now, in those two paragraphs, did you indicate anything about her telling you that her name was Katrina or Courtney or anything like that?
No, ma'am. I didn't put it in my report.
Okay.
The report was written within 12 hours of a very traumatic, chaotic scene, and it was omitted in my report.
And the purpose for writing a report right after something happens is so that you can record it when it's fresh on your memory, correct?
Well, typically, I would wait a little longer to process everything that went on. I was asked to get the reports, get this turned in ASAP, so I did.
And at the point that you did it, you put details that's specific in quotes about Eric set me on fire.
Yes, ma'am, I heard that.
So your first opportunity to talk to Miss Jessica was when she was on the ground behind the fire truck, correct?
That's correct.
And actually you had another opportunity to speak to her. You agree with that?
Yes, ma'am, I approached her again in the ambulance where
Yes.
it was not as noisy.
Okay. If you would go 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th paragraph down there.
I then went to the ambulance to the 2 ambulance personnel and firefighter paramedic Casey Austin was prepping Jessica for transport to the landing zone. I asked her again, who did this? And she said, Eric did. He set me on fire. And I asked Eric who? And again, got the same response, like she didn't know. The 3 medical personnel acknowledged that they had heard what she'd said, and I exited the ambulance.
Yes. Thank you. And I believe that you indicated her breathing was somewhat labored.
Her breathing was labored, her speech, she struggled to get out everything she got.
Okay.
Now, to tell you that some of it wasn't clear, I'm not going to say that. I mean, you could understand some things she said, but not everything.
Yes, sir. And but certainly the things you did understand her to say, you put that in the report.
I did.
Okay.
Quotes.
And quotes, you said?
Yes.
Now, your report indicates that you also gave this same information that's in your report. Eric set me on fire. Eric, I don't know his last name. What's in here, you stated that to law enforcement. I think Edward Dixon, I believe.
It was Edward Dixon or Panola 10 or Panola 22, which would be, 10 would be Darrell House. Panola 22, I think, is Maurice Market. I'm not sure exactly who. I know I gave it, I'm more than positive I gave it to Edward Dixon, but I also verbally related to the other 2.
Yes, sir. And Barry Thompson as well by phone.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, Mr. Cole, you were also given some information that from 2 of the, or at least one of the other firefighters, Cortland Fire, that there was a suspicious person on the scene. You recall getting that information?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And let me make sure I had the name. It would have either been, Will Turner?
I know Will Turner, yes, ma'am.
You do. And he's with Cortland Fire Department,
Yes,
correct?
ma'am.
And I'm sorry I couldn't hear you. Yes, sir?
ma'am.
Okay.
I do.
And then Brandy Davis, I believe. You know him as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And they gave you some information that they thought they had seen a suspicious older black male on the scene of the fire. You agree with that?
Yes, ma'am. Seems like I do recall them telling me that.
Yes. And they went as far as to give you a tag number of this
Yes, ma'am.
person that they thought was out there. You
That's
received
correct.
that?
I do remember receiving the tag number.
Gave that information to Edward Dixon.
They gave it to the law enforcement. Yes, ma'am.
Now, my last questions have to do with, I believe that, I'm not sure if you're in this same capacity now, but you're a co-coordinator of search and rescue team.
Yes, ma'am.
Did I get that correct?
You're correct.
Okay. And it's your understanding that back then, this was December 6th, maybe a couple of days after that, that there was a search and rescue team sent out.
We were requested to come out and walk the side of the road and see if we discovered anything that could be considered evidence.
And you thought that keys were found.
At one point in time, the discussion of keys came up. I don't know that anybody on our search and rescue team found them, but and it may have been the keys is what prompted us to go out. I don't know. You would have to refer that question to someone else. We were requested and we came out.
Okay. And at that, basically what you're saying is you don't know the results of that.
No, ma'am. Never laid eyes on.
And after you gave your statement or your report back then, basically there were no additional encounters with law enforcement from you.
No, ma'am.
Of course, indulge just a moment.
Yes, ma'am.
I would send it to witness, Your Honor.
All right, redirect.
Daniel, she asked, Ms. Palmer asked you about this being fresh on your mind. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Is this something that will ever not be fresh on your mind?
I see that picture I took every morning, every night.
She asked you about the search and rescue. When would the search and rescue team, I mean, this happened on a Saturday night, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
That's correct.
And when would the search and rescue team have been called out?
Again, I don't have anything in front of me. I would guess it would have been Monday afternoon or Tuesday. I can't speak to the exact date and time.
Ms. Palmer also asked you about a suspicious black male being on scene. Is that correct?
Yes,
A
ma'am.
suspicious male.
Yes.
I'm not sure how she referred it. How large is Cortland?
1 square mile.
Something like this happens, you got a lot of nosy people around?
Yes, sir. On anything.
Were there a lot of people out that night?
There was.
And did you, along with other firemen, attempt to secure the area of the scene?
As best we could. I mean, I didn't. I was tending to Jessica and trying to figure out who she was and who might have done it.
And let me ask you a question based on your experience in securing crimes. Does that sometimes include running people off?
It does.
Finally, you stated in your report what you said you heard.
Mm-hmm.
You've already testified. Is that correct? Is that correct?
That's correct.
You've already testified as to the condition that Jessica was in her speaking.
Yes.
Is this what Jessica Chambers looked like on December 16, 2014, while you were talking to her?
Yes.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
What instructions would you give the witness?
I would ask Mr. Cole to be finally excused.
Mr. Cole, you're finally excused. You can leave or you may remain in the courtroom. Your choice, sir. Thank you.